The young Virginia girl accidentally tore the Millionaire's vest. What happened next was unbelievable. The golden glow of the chandeliers shimmered across the polished marble floors of La Maison Royale, one of the most exclusive fine dining restaurants in Washington, D.C. It was the kind of place where every detail mattered, from the way the silverware was arranged to the temperature of the wine. Mistakes were not tolerated. And tonight, Emma Brooks was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Emma adjusted her uniform, smoothing out the front of her crisp white blouse as she balanced a tray of expensive wine glasses. She had been working at La Maison Royale for 3 months now, long enough to know that the clientele here were not forgiving. Billionaires, politicians, celebrities, they all dined here, expecting perfection. And no one expected perfection more than Jasper Whitmore. Sitting at the most exclusive VIP table, Jasper was the kind of man everyone feared and respected. At 32, he was one of the most powerful hotel moguls in the country, ruthless in business, intolerant of incompetence, and infamous for his cold, unreadable demeanor. Dressed in a tailored Armani vest, he exuded an effortless dominance that made even the most confident people uneasy. He had a reputation for never forgiving mistakes. And tonight, Emma was about to become his next target. The restaurant was buzzing, every table filled with high-profile guests. Emma took a deep breath, carefully making her way toward Jasper's table. One wrong move in a place like this could cost her not just her job, but her dignity. Her heart pounded as she stepped closer. The tray in her hands felt heavier than usual, her palms slightly damp with nervousness. Then, it happened in an instant. A waiter rushed past her, brushing against her just enough to throw her off balance. Her foot slipped, her body tilted forward, and before she could stop it, the tray wobbled dangerously. The crystal wine glass at the edge of the tray tipped over, and a rich, deep red stream of Bordeaux splashed directly onto Jasper's vest. A horrified silence fell over the restaurant. Every pair of eyes turned to them, staring in disbelief. For a second, Emma couldn't move. The only sound she could hear was the furious pounding of her own heart. Then, a low, icy voice cut through the silence like a knife. "What did you just do?" Emma's breath caught in her throat. Jasper had risen from his seat, his piercing blue eyes locked onto her like a predator sizing up its prey. The deep red stain spread across his pristine, custom-tailored Armani vest, a mark of her unforgivable mistake. She swallowed hard. I'm so sorry." Her voice trembled, her hands gripping the tray so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Jasper's expression didn't change. Not anger, not frustration. Just pure, terrifying coldness. "Do you even realize what you've done?" His voice was eerily calm, but it carried the weight of a storm waiting to break. Emma's mind raced. She had to fix this. I'll pay for the damage," she blurted out, desperation creeping into her voice. Jasper's lips curled into a slow, mirthless smirk. "Pay for it?" he repeated, voice dripping with amusement. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Do you even know how much this vest costs?" Emma hesitated, shaking her head. Jasper stepped closer. "More than your entire salary for the next 6 months." Emma felt her stomach drop. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a loud, angry voice cut in. "That's it. You're fired." Her manager had appeared, his face red with fury. Emma's eyes widened. "Wait, please. It was an accident." But the manager wasn't listening. "You've humiliated our VIP guest. Pack your things and leave, now do." Her chest tightened. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Not when she had rent due. Not when she had left everything behind in Virginia to start a better life. But just as the manager was about to grab her arm, a low, authoritative voice stopped him in his tracks. "No, she stays." A gasp rippled through the room. Emma turned to Jasper, eyes wide with shock. Even her manager looked stunned. "Sir, but—" Jasper held up a hand, silencing him instantly. Then, slowly, he turned to Emma, and what he said next sent a shiver down her spine. "I have a different way for her to make up for this." Emma's breath hitched. She wasn't sure whether she had just been saved or sentenced to something even worse. Emma's breath was still uneven as she stared at Jasper, his words reverberating through her mind like a thunderclap. "Be my personal assistant for a month. Consider it working to pay off your debt." Her lips parted slightly, confusion and disbelief swirling in her chest. She had expected him to demand money, compensation, or simply have her fired. But this This was something else entirely. The restaurant had gone completely silent, every eye locked onto them, waiting for her response. Emma's manager still looked stunned but quickly recovered. "Mr. Whitmore, are you sure? She's just a waitress." Jasper cut him off without even looking his way. "I wasn't asking for your opinion." The sheer authority in his voice made the manager's face pale, and he instantly shrank back. Jasper then turned his gaze back to Emma. "Well?" Emma swallowed hard. "Becoming his personal assistant? For a whole month. She barely knew anything about the corporate world, let alone handling a man like Jasper Whitmore. But what choice did she have? If she refused, she'd be fired on the spot. And without this job, she'd have nowhere to go, no way to pay her rent, no way to survive in this city. Her entire future was hanging by a thread. So finally, with trembling fingers, she nodded. "Okay, I'll do it." Jasper's expression didn't change, but for a brief moment, she thought she saw a flicker of amusement in his icy blue eyes. "Good," he said smoothly. "Be at my office at 8 sharp tomorrow morning. Don't be late." Then, without another word, he turned and strode out of the restaurant, leaving Emma completely breathless, her heart hammering against her ribs. The next morning, Emma stood outside Whitmore Enterprises, a towering glass skyscraper that seemed to pierce the sky itself. She adjusted her blazer, feeling incredibly out of place among the high-powered executives streaming into the building in their expensive suits and designer heels. She had barely slept the night before. Her mind had been racing, trying to prepare herself for whatever was coming. Taking a deep breath, she steeled herself and stepped inside. The interior was just as intimidating as she had imagined, sleek, modern, and utterly immaculate. It was a world so different from hers, it almost felt unreal. She approached the receptionist, clearing her throat. "Hi, I'm Emma Brooks." Mr. Whitmore asked me to." Before she could even finish, the receptionist, a woman with sharp eyes and a perfectly styled bun, gave her a once-over, her expression unreadable. "We've been expecting you," she said smoothly. "Take the private elevator to the top floor." Emma hesitated before nodding. As the elevator doors slid shut, she felt her stomach twist with nerves. This was it. Her first day as Jasper Whitmore's assistant. And she had absolutely no idea what she was in for. The moment Emma stepped into Jasper's office, she realized just how out of her depth she was. The room was massive, all glass walls and sleek black furniture, overlooking a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Jasper sat behind a polished mahogany desk, dressed in another impeccable suit, his fingers gliding effortlessly across his laptop keyboard. He didn't even look up when she entered. "You're late." Emma blinked, glancing at her phone. 7:59 a.m. I'm not late," she stammered. Jasper finally lifted his gaze, his blue eyes pinning her in place. "You should have been here 5 minutes ago," he said smoothly. "A good assistant is always early." Emma's jaw clenched, but she swallowed down her frustration. It was too early to argue with him. Instead, she exhaled sharply and straightened her posture. "What do you need me to do?" Jasper leaned back in his chair, watching her like a cat watching a mouse. "Let's see if you can keep up." Then, without warning, he started giving her orders at a blistering speed. "Schedule my meetings for the week. Cancel my lunch with Richard Wellington, but reschedule for next Thursday at 1. Prepare the financial reports for my 10 a.m. meeting. Get me an espresso, extra strong, no sugar." Emma's mind reeled. Meetings? Reports? Rescheduling? She had no idea how to do any of this. But she refused to let him see her panic. "Got it," she said, turning on her heel. She was going to figure this out, one way or another. Within the first hour, Emma realized just how difficult this job actually was. Jasper expected everything to be perfect, and he had zero patience for mistakes. The first time she mispronounced a client's name, he gave her a sharp, unimpressed look. When she accidentally booked the wrong time for a meeting, he simply said, "Fix it," in a tone that made her feel like a complete idiot. And when she brought him the wrong kind of espresso, he merely raised an eyebrow before pushing the cup aside without a word. By midday, she was already exhausted, her brain struggling to keep up with his impossible standards. And yet, she didn't quit. Every time she made a mistake, she forced herself to learn from it. Every time Jasper criticized her, she gritted her teeth and worked harder. Because if there was one thing Emma Brooks didn't do, it was give up. By the time her first day ended, Emma felt like she had been run over by a freight train. She had never worked this hard in her life, and Jasper had been nothing short of ruthless. But as she gathered her things, Preparing to leave, she noticed something strange. Jasper was still at his desk, typing away, his shoulders slightly tense, his brows furrowed. For a moment, he didn't look like the untouchable billionaire everyone feared. He looked tired, human. The thought startled her. She quickly shook it off and turned to go. But just as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "You did better than I expected." Emma froze. Did he just compliment her? She turned back, stunned. What? Jasper was still typing, not even glancing up. "Don't make me repeat myself." Emma's lips parted in shock. Then, before she could say anything else, he waved a dismissive hand. "You're dismissed. Be here earlier tomorrow." Emma walked out of the office, her mind spinning. She had survived her first day. Barely. And yet somehow, she had the strangest feeling that this was only the beginning. The days turned into a relentless blur of work, stress, and exhaustion. Emma barely had time to breathe, let alone think about anything else. Every morning she arrived earlier than expected, and every night she left the office long after most of the staff had gone home. Jasper was demanding, sharp-tongued, and brutally efficient, but despite everything, Emma began to notice something beneath the surface. Something she hadn't seen before. Jasper wasn't just cold, he was distant. Not in the way of a boss who simply didn't care about his employees, but in the way of a man who had spent years keeping people at arm's length. At first, Emma had assumed he was just another arrogant billionaire, someone born into privilege, who didn't know what struggle felt like. But as she watched him more closely, she realized that wasn't the case at all. There were nights when he stayed in his office far later than he needed to, staring at his laptop, but not really looking at it. There were moments when he would pause in the middle of a conversation, his jaw tightening as if his thoughts had drifted somewhere painful. And then there was the photograph. One afternoon, Emma had been organizing Jasper's desk while he was out in a meeting. She had no intention of prying, but as she reached for a stack of papers, a small framed photo slipped out from beneath them. It clattered onto the desk, face up. And that was the moment Emma froze. The photo was of a beautiful woman, her eyes warm, her smile radiant. She looked younger than Jasper, but there was something about the way she stood beside him that felt intimate. A sister? A lover? Emma's fingers hovered over the frame, tempted to pick it up, but before she could, "Put that back." Emma startled, her head snapping up. Jasper was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable, but there was a warning in his tone. I didn't mean to snoop," Emma stammered, quickly setting the photo back in place. Jasper walked over and picked it up himself, his fingers lingering over the image for just a second. Then, with a sharp exhale, he turned it face down. Emma hesitated, unsure if she should ask. But before she could say anything, Jasper spoke again, his voice lower this time. "There are some things I don't discuss, Miss Brooks." And just like that, the walls went back up. Emma nodded slowly. Understood. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just glimpsed a part of him no one else ever saw. It was nearly midnight when Emma realized she had worked too late again. The office was quiet, the usual hum of voices and ringing phones long gone. Jasper was still at his desk, of course he always was. Emma had stayed behind to finish compiling reports he needed in the morning. She told herself she wasn't doing it to impress him, but deep down, she knew that wasn't entirely true. She wanted to prove to him that she could handle this world, that she wasn't just some small-town girl out of her depth. Her eyes felt heavy, her fingers slower as she typed. And before she knew it, she blinked once, twice, and then everything faded into darkness. Emma woke up to warmth. Something soft was draped over her shoulders, shielding her from the chill of the office air conditioning. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion settling in. She was still at her desk, her laptop screen still glowing faintly. But there was something else different. Slowly she reached up, her fingers brushing against a coat. Not just any coat. Jasper's coat. She stiffened, glancing around. Jasper was still at his desk, working as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just placed his expensive, tailored jacket over her while she was asleep. Emma's heart skipped a beat. For a moment she considered pretending she didn't notice. But then she saw it. The way Jasper's hand paused over his laptop touchpad for just a second, as if he was waiting to see what she would do. So instead of ignoring it, she carefully pulled the coat tighter around herself, letting it shield her from the cold once more. A silent acceptance. She swore she saw the faintest hint of a smirk on Jasper's lips before he returned to work. And for the first time, Emma wondered, Maybe Jasper Whitmore wasn't as heartless as he wanted everyone to believe. Emma had always known there was something different about Jasper Whitmore. He was cold, yes, demanding, ruthless, and impossible to please. But beneath the sharp words and unreadable expressions, there was something else, a deep loneliness, a silence that spoke louder than words. She just didn't know why. Until one afternoon when she finally found the missing pieces. It started with a casual conversation in the break room. Emma had been grabbing coffee, trying to shake off another stressful morning of running around after Jasper's impossible requests. Beside her, Mrs. Reynolds, the longest-serving employee in Whitmore Enterprises, stirred her tea slowly, watching Emma with a knowing expression. "You've lasted longer than most," the older woman mused. Emma let out a breathless laugh. Not sure if that's a compliment or a warning. Mrs. Reynolds chuckled. "A bit of both." Then, after a pause, she added softly, "Do you know about his family?" Emma froze, cup halfway to her lips. She had heard whispers here and there, but Jasper never talked about them. Still, the curiosity had always been there, lingering in the back of her mind. She hesitated. "I know they owned hotels before him." "That's about it." Mrs. Reynolds nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "His father, James Whitmore, built the first Whitmore Grand Hotel when Jasper was just a child. By the time Jasper turned 20, they owned properties all over the country." Emma listened carefully, heart thudding a little faster. But then Mrs. Reynolds sighed, her voice lowering. Everything changed. Emma leaned forward, gripping her cup tighter. "What happened?" The older woman's eyes flickered with something between sadness and regret. "His parents died in a car accident. But the thing is," she hesitated, "no one really knows if it was an accident at all." A chill ran down Emma's spine. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Reynolds shook her head. "There were rumors. Some said it was a business rival trying to push the Whitmores out of the industry. Others believed it was just a tragic twist of fate." Emma swallowed hard. "And Jasper? He changed overnight," the woman said softly. "He took over the company at just 21. Didn't trust anyone. Didn't let anyone get close. His entire world became about control, because if he controlled everything, no one could ever take anything from him again." Emma felt her chest tighten. Suddenly, Jasper's obsession with perfection, power, and absolute authority made sense. It wasn't about arrogance. It was about survival. That night, Emma couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, when she walked into Jasper's office, she saw everything differently. The way his desk was always immaculately arranged, as if disorder itself was the enemy. The way he never let his guard down, never showed a sign of weakness. The way he avoided talking about the past, burying it under layers of work and control. And for the first time, she didn't see a heartless businessman. She saw a man who had been left alone in the world, forced to build everything from the ground up, terrified of losing it all again. And something inside her softened. She wasn't sure when it happened. But at some point, she stopped just working for Jasper Whitmore and started caring. Emma didn't say anything to Jasper about what she had learned, but she started making small changes. Things he wouldn't notice at first but would slowly chip away at the ice around him. She adjusted the cold, sterile lighting in his office, replacing it with softer, warmer tones. She left a small plant on his desk one morning, saying it would help with oxygen levels, but really, she just wanted the space to feel less lifeless. She started bringing an extra cup of coffee, not because he asked, but because he always forgot to eat when he was deep in work. At first, Jasper didn't react, didn't even acknowledge the changes, but then one morning he paused. Emma had just set a fresh espresso on his desk, preparing to walk away, but instead of ignoring her, he glanced at the tiny green plant sitting next to his laptop. A beat of silence. Then, his voice quiet but sharp. "You're changing my office." Emma tensed. "If you hate it, I can." "I didn't say I hated it." She turned to look at him, and for the first time she saw something flicker in his expression. Not annoyance, not indifference, something closer to curiosity, something closer to acceptance. Emma held back a smile. "Good," she said, "because I'm not finished yet." Jasper didn't reply. But that day, for the first time in years, his assistant walked out of his office, and he found himself almost looking forward to seeing what she would change next. It was a Friday evening, and most of the office had already cleared out. Emma was finishing up one last email, rubbing her tired eyes, when she heard the softest sound. A chuckle. She froze. Slowly, she turned toward Jasper. He was standing by the window, his phone in one hand, a ghost of a smirk on his lips. A smirk. Not a cold, calculating one. A real one. Emma's mouth fell open slightly. "Did you just laugh?" Jasper turned, raising a brow. "You sound surprised." "I am," she admitted. Jasper let out a slow breath, looking out at the city skyline. "People say I don't do that much," he murmured. Emma tilted her head. "Maybe they've just never given you a reason to." Jasper met her gaze then, and for the first time, there was no coldness there. Just something deep, quiet, thoughtful. A shift. A moment Emma knew neither of them would ever forget. And for the first time, she thought, maybe Jasper Whitmore wasn't as unreachable as everyone thought. Emma had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found her place in Jasper's world. The cold, distant man she had met weeks ago had begun to soften little by little. He trusted her. He looked at her differently. And more than once, she had caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was something there, something unspoken but undeniably real. But just as she let herself believe in it, Sophia Kingsley walked back into Jasper's life. It was a quiet afternoon, and Emma was reviewing Jasper's schedule when the office doors swung open. She barely had time to react before a tall, elegant woman strode in, her heels clicking against the marble floors. Her blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves, her fitted designer dress flawless, and her eyes sharp as a blade. Everything about her radiated power and confidence. Emma didn't need an introduction. She already knew who this woman was. Sophia Kingsley, heiress to a real estate empire. A woman born into privilege, wealth, and influence. And most importantly, Jasper Whitmore's former fiancée. Emma's stomach tightened. She had heard whispers from the other employees about how Jasper had been engaged once, years ago. But what she hadn't expected was for Sophia to show up now, right when Emma had begun to feel like she mattered. Jasper walked out of his office, his usual unreadable expression in place, but something flickered in his eyes when he saw Sophia. A mix of annoyance and familiarity. "Sophia," he said coolly. Sophia's red lips curled into a smirk. "Jasper, it's been too long." Emma felt like an outsider in her own space, standing frozen as she watched their interaction. Sophia's perfectly manicured nails traced the edge of his desk as she spoke. "New assistant?" she mused, glancing at Emma without interest. "She's different from the usual ones." Emma felt her face heat up, but she refused to lower her gaze. Jasper didn't bother to entertain Sophia's games. "Why are you here?" Sophia sighed, as if bored. "I'm back in town. I thought it would be nice to catch up." Jasper remained impassive, but Emma wasn't blind. She saw the way Sophia leaned in, her voice dropping into something silkier, more intimate. "I heard you've been spending a lot of time with your assistant," she said, her eyes flicking toward Emma. Jasper's jaw tightened slightly. Sophia smiled. "Jasper," she purred, "we both know you don't do relationships. So tell me," she turned to Emma, her gaze sharp. "Do you really think he's serious about you?" Emma felt the floor shift beneath her. Sophia didn't have to say much. She knew exactly how to deliver the perfect cut. She didn't insult Emma outright. She didn't have to. She simply made Emma question everything. Was Jasper just entertaining himself? Would he ever truly look at her the way she looked at him? She was just his assistant after all. She had no wealth, no connections, no name worth remembering. What if she was just another passing interest? Sophia must have seen the flicker of doubt in Emma's eyes, because she smirked. "Men like Jasper," she said, adjusting her purse, "don't change. And they certainly don't fall for people like you." And with that, she turned on her heels and walked out. That night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Sophia's words kept repeating in her head, over and over again. She thought about Jasper's world, his money, his power, his legacy. And then she thought about herself. A small-town girl from Virginia. She had fought so hard to prove herself, but deep down she knew she would never truly belong in his world. So the next morning she made her decision. She walked into the office one last time, resignation letter in hand. When she stepped into Jasper's office, he looked up, his brows furrowing slightly when he saw her expression. "What is it?" he asked. Emma took a deep breath and placed the letter on his desk. "I'm leaving." The room went dead silent. Jasper's gaze darkened instantly. "What?" Emma forced herself to stay strong. "I appreciate everything you've done for me," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "but I don't belong here." Jasper's jaw clenched. That's not your decision to make." Emma shook her head. "It is. And I've already made it." For the first time, Jasper looked unsettled, his fingers curled into fists, his body going rigid, as if he was trying to control something inside himself. "Is this about Sophia?" His voice was dangerously quiet. Emma's breath hitched, but she refused to answer. She knew if she did, he would see the truth, and she couldn't let that happen. So instead, she simply whispered, "Goodbye, Jasper." And then she walked away. Jasper sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the empty space where she had just stood. His entire body felt unnaturally still, like he had just been punched in the chest. She was gone. And it wasn't until that moment, until he watched her disappear out of his life, that he finally understood. He needed her. Not as an assistant, not as an employee, as Emma. As the only person who had ever challenged him, stood up to him, changed him, and he had just let her slip through his fingers. For the first time in years, Jasper Whitmore felt something terrifying. Regret. Jasper Whitmore had built his life around control. Every deal, every decision, every second of his day, meticulously planned, perfectly executed. Yet now, as he sat alone in his office, staring at the empty chair where Emma used to sit, he felt nothing but chaos. He should have been relieved. Emma was gone. He could go back to his orderly, predictable life, free of distractions, free of the way she challenged him, softened him, made him feel things he shouldn't. And yet, everything felt wrong. His coffee tasted bitter. His office felt too quiet. Even his schedule, once his lifeline, felt meaningless. For the first time in his life, Jasper was distracted, and he hated it. One evening, after another long, miserable day, Jasper found himself in his penthouse, pouring a glass of whiskey. He had just sat down when something caught his eye, a familiar fabric, tucked into the corner of his wardrobe. He walked over, pulling it out, and then froze. It was the vest, the very one Emma had accidentally torn the night they met. His fingers traced the barely visible tear in the expensive fabric. For the first time, he allowed himself to think back to that moment. The shock on her face, the way her hands had trembled as she apologized, the way she had stood her ground, even when terrified. He had mocked her that night, but now all he could think was that was the moment everything changed. That was the moment she changed him. Jasper let out a slow, shaky breath. Then, before he could stop himself, he grabbed his phone. He scrolled to her number, paused, then dialed. Voicemail. Jasper clenched his jaw. She wasn't going to answer. Because she was gone. Because he had let her go. And for the first time in his entire life, Jasper realized he had made a mistake, and he was going to fix it. Jasper canceled all his meetings, postponed every business deal, and did something he had never done before. He walked away from work. For the first time, he put someone above his empire. Within hours, his private jet was soaring toward Virginia, toward the only person who at Prague truly mattered. The moment he landed, he didn't waste time. He had already done his research. It wasn't hard to find her. Small-town girls don't just disappear. And sure enough, there she was. In a tiny cafe on the corner of a quiet street, an apron tied around her waist, serving coffee with a tired but gentle smile. Jasper stood outside for a moment, watching her, taking her in, and realizing he couldn't live without her. Then he stepped inside. Emma was wiping down a table when she felt it. That tingling awareness, like being watched. She turned, and her heart nearly stopped. Jasper Whitmore was standing in the doorway, looking as out of place in this small cafe as a lion in a field of lambs. His expensive coat, his tailored suit, completely at odds with the rustic wooden tables and faded wallpaper. But none of that mattered, because the look in his eyes, intense, raw, unshakable, was something she had never seen before. She swallowed hard, gripping the cloth in her hands. "What are you doing here?" Jasper didn't hesitate. He strode forward, stopping just inches from her. Then, in a voice that left no room for argument, he said, "I won't let you leave me that easily." Emma sucked in a sharp breath. Her grip tightened on the rag. "Jasper," she whispered, shaking her head. "You shouldn't be here." Jasper's jaw tensed. "Do you love me?" he asked, voice low, almost dangerous. Emma's heart pounded. Yes or no, Emma?" She hesitated, but in the silence her eyes betrayed her. Jasper saw it. He always saw the truth. "That's what I thought," he murmured. Then, with absolute certainty, he said, "I'm not leaving without you." And just like that, Emma's entire world shifted once more. The sky over Virginia had been clear all day, but as if fate had planned it, the rain started falling the moment Emma stepped out of the cafe. She had told herself she wouldn't follow him. She had told herself that if she just stayed inside, he would eventually walk away. But she couldn't do it. Because Jasper Whitmore wasn't a man who simply gave up, and neither was she. So now here they were, standing in the middle of an empty street, rain soaking through their clothes, the weight of everything hanging between them. Jasper didn't look like a billionaire right now. He didn't look like the ruthless CEO, the man who never lost control. Right now, he was just a man fighting for the one thing he couldn't afford to lose. And as Emma stood there, shivering from the rain, from the storm raging inside her chest, he took a deep breath and finally said the words he had been holding back for far too long. "Emma, I can't let you go." Emma's breath caught. "Jasper." But he wasn't finished. "You think you were just my assistant. Just some girl who worked for me. But you were never just anything." His voice was raw, unguarded, completely unlike the Jasper she had known before. "You walked into my life and God, Emma, you ruined everything I thought I knew about myself." Emma let out a shaky laugh, tears mixing with the raindrops on her cheeks. "That's not exactly a compliment," she whispered. But Jasper only took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "No, it's not. But it's the truth." Emma's fingers curled into fists, her emotions a mess of hope and fear. But Jasper, she hesitated, shaking her head. "I'm just a girl from Virginia," he finished for her. Emma looked down, biting her lip. "Yes," she whispered, "I don't belong in your world. I never did." Jasper let out a low, exasperated chuckle, running a hand through his rain-soaked hair. "Emma, don't you understand?" She blinked up at him. "I don't need someone perfect. I just need you." The words broke something inside her, because for the first time she realized he wasn't just fighting to keep her here. He was fighting for himself too, for the man he wanted to be, for the life he never thought he could have. Emma let out a soft, breathless laugh, wiping at her damp cheeks. "You're impossible," she murmured. Jasper smirked, stepping even closer. "And yet, you love me anyway." Her lips parted in shock, her heart pounding wildly against her ribs. But before she could respond, Jasper reached out, cupping her face gently between his hands. And then, he kissed her. The rain poured down around them, but all Emma could feel was the warmth of him, the way he held her like she was the most precious thing in his world. It wasn't a kiss of desperation. It wasn't a kiss of uncertainty. It was a promise that no matter where they came from, they belonged together. And as she kissed him back, pouring every unsaid word, every unspoken feeling into that moment, she finally let herself believe it. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. A year had passed since that night in the rain. A year since Jasper Whitmore had chased Emma Brooks down, told her he loved her, and kissed her as if his entire world depended on it. A year since they had stopped running from each other and started building something real. And now, as Emma stood in front of a grand hotel entrance, the golden lights illuminating the luxurious facade, she realized everything had changed. And yet, somehow, it all felt right. Emma smoothed out the lapels of her blazer, looking up at the massive Whitmore Grand Hotel sign hanging above the entrance. This wasn't just any hotel. This was her hotel. Jasper had spent the last year mentoring her, pushing her, believing in her, and now, she was officially stepping into the role of general manager for this brand new luxury hotel, the first in the Whitmore chain that she had helped build from the ground up. It felt unreal. Just a year ago, she had been a struggling waitress, terrified of losing her job over a spilled glass of wine and a torn vest. And now, she was standing beside the man she loved, leading an entire hotel staff, proving to herself and the world that she belonged here. As guests and reporters gathered for the grand opening, she felt a familiar presence step beside her. Jasper, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his stormy blue eyes filled with something only she got to see: pride, admiration, love. He leaned in, his voice low, meant only for her. "Nervous?" Emma exhaled slowly, but there was a small, confident smile on her lips. "Not even a little," she whispered back. Jasper chuckled softly, his hand finding hers, his thumb grazing over her knuckles in a silent reassurance. "You're incredible," he murmured, his voice filled with something deeper than admiration. Emma tilted her head toward him, smirking. "And you're biased." Jasper's lips curved. "Not at all, just stating facts." As the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, Jasper took the microphone, his usual air of authority in place, but there was something lighter about him now. Something only Emma had been able to bring out in him. He spoke about the vision for the hotel, about the dedication of his team, about the future of Whitmore Enterprises. But then, in front of the cameras, the investors, the guests, he turned to Emma. "And none of this," he said, his voice dropping into something softer, something real, "would be possible without the woman standing beside me today." Emma's breath caught. She had never been one for attention, but as Jasper reached for her hand in front of everyone, she didn't pull away. Because this wasn't just about business or success or the company. This was about them. About the woman who had walked into his life by accident and somehow ended up being the most important part of it. And when Jasper's fingers tightened around hers, she knew what was coming next. Jasper leaned down, so close that only she could hear. "I will never let you go again." Emma felt the sting of emotion in her chest, her fingers curling into his. "Good," she whispered back, "because I was never planning on leaving." Jasper smirked. And then, in front of the world, in front of the city that had once tried to break them apart, he kissed her. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise. A statement. A reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the smallest mistakes. And as the cameras flashed, the applause echoed, and the city of Washington, D.C., watched a billionaire fall completely. Irrevocably in love with a girl from Virginia, Emma Brooks knew, without a doubt, she had finally found where she belonged. With him, forever. From a spilled glass of wine to a love story that defied all odds, Emma and Jasper's journey proves that sometimes the smallest accidents can lead to the most unexpected miracles. Jasper thought he had everything: power, wealth, control. But it wasn't until Emma came into his life that he realized he had nothing without love. And Emma? She thought she was just a small-town girl, never meant to fit into his world. But in the end, she didn't just fit, she changed it forever. Their story reminds us that love isn't about where you come from, but who you choose to fight for. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more emotional, inspiring, and life-changing tales. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories start with a single, unexpected moment. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.